Welcome everyone to Payments After COVID, the Changing Payments Paradigm. I'm Dale Lazick, Senior Staff Writer at the Green Sheet, and I'm delighted to welcome you to MPC 21. And I'm joined today by 4 innovators in our industry who have not only survived and thrived during a pandemic, they're actually redefining a new generation of connected commerce. And I'm pleased to introduce Eric Allen, CEO at Listener, a company that's leveraging ultrasound technologies to drive touchless commerce and proximity verification. And Chris Brenner, founder and CEO of Auth, a SaaS platform that's creating white-labeled innovative payments experiences focused on B2C billing. And Will Graylin, founder and CEO of OV-Loop, creator of a true universal contactless wallet and end-to-end message commerce platform. And David Shackleton, CEO at OpenBack, a company that's leveraging edge computing to enhance real-time delivery with push notifications and in-app messaging. Welcome to all of you. And also, I'd like to say before we get started, if we don't have a chance to get to your questions, please go ahead and check back at this session, because we will continue to respond to any questions on this platform, and it will be live for quite a while. And don't hesitate to get in touch with the individual innovators and their companies. So to get started, I'd like to ask Eric, your solutions that leverage sound, how do they help merchants, consumers, and mobility companies during and after the pandemic?
Thank you, Dale, for having me. So Listener, we really focus on authentication and verification within the payment flow. And as Dale mentioned, we use ultrasonic technology to create secure device association. It really allows both merchants and consumers to secure that data through that transmission. Especially as safety becomes kind of the forefront, distance control and the ability to leverage sound to securely transmit data between consumers and merchants has really been a catalyst for the use and adoption of Listener. So we use software. We're not a hardware-based solution. And in our software, we essentially create unique digital signals over audio that really allow devices to authenticate, and from that authentication, transmit data, and as mentioned, transmit data over whatever distances that the merchants want to define across those different digital channels.
I think you're muted,
Marla,
Dale.
you're on mute. Or Dale, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. And also, Chris, I'd be interested in your perspective on the driving forces behind the payment industry's push to make payments more streamlined.
Chris, are you on mute?
Chris, I think you're muted.
How about that? Is that a little better? So for years, we saw the Northern California companies mostly, trying to take payments and make it all about the customer experience and make it less about the transaction. And you saw that with Uber, and you see it with Amazon, you see it with Stripe and Square and some others. And I think that the larger payment entities, guys that run 80-90% of the volume through the businesses today, are learning that it's time to start bringing innovation to market, right? And so we saw it in the messaging space as soon as Uber and Marriott and Grubhub start texting you about your food or your car or your hotel, and then the very next piece of that is, how do you make that a better transaction? How do you make that a payment experience in those same flows? So as the messaging companies got on board with this, And we saw as these innovative payment companies start to push the needle in terms of moving towards a better consumer experience, we're now seeing the larger system, the larger payment providers really start to embrace this and understand that there's a better way to communicate and really affect a transaction between a merchant and a consumer.
Thank you. And, you know, as we look ahead, you know, I think that we all need to really kind of join forces to make sure that all of the adoption that we saw during COVID was more than just a moment. So I'd like to get Will's perspective on what type of responses you're seeing to your beta test of your universal wallet, and what can we do as an industry to help drive mobile wallet adoption?
Well, I think you're muted.
Oops, we're all making that mistake today. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Eric. So for that question, what OV Loop is focused on right now is really a connected commerce platform where we're moving to the next generation of multi-channel commerce that can interact across different devices and in different modes. So we created a solution that happens to have an application that we just released to beta. And it's a journey that we're on to provide what's called a super wallet that's a next generation wallet for consumers. And that super wallet, instead of the business holding all of your content and credentials in one place, along with everybody else's content and credentials in a centralized database that is encrypted with one master root key, we decided to create a self-custody crypto vault for every individual so that you can manage your own content. You can put whatever credentials that you want to, whether it's a payment credential, an ID, a membership card, NFTs, crypto keys, it doesn't really matter. Bank accounts, passports, passwords. These are all credentials that we normally keep in all of these different places. And in fact, they're scattered all over the place. And it's hard for us to have one central location to keep them and use them just about everywhere. So we started down this journey, and we're leveraging the latest blockchain era cryptography to create a single private key for each individual user. We can't even access this, our admin can't access it, and we reduce the chances of hackers getting into a database to steal all of this data. We heard about the T-Mobile hack, we heard about all of these different data breaches, and unfortunately, once they breach the data, they have access to the keys of the kingdom. So we say, why don't we not only have a one place for each individual to have their own locking key, to keep all different forms of data, but allow them to use this data in the way that they normally would shop or gain access. So you mentioned contactless. We have created a solution that not only allows your phone to be able to tap and pay, which we ended up acquiring a company called Simply Tap that invented host card emulation for NFC tap and pay. But we also, with my last company, LoopPay, that was sold to Samsung with our technology of MST, magnetic secure transmission. We were able to license back from Samsung that technology and put NFC and MST into a supercard that allows you to store your tokens and be able to tap and pay. So we started with a beta that allows one of our cards to be able to do that. And then over the next months, we're going to be adding other tokens from Visa, MasterCard. But this particular device is just another means to transmit contactless payments. Certainly, there are various ways to do it, QR codes, and as you mentioned, ultrasonic sound. These are various ways to transmit credentials. For us, we're independent of device, independent of channel, and then independent of tender type. So we want to support all different tender types and give and empower consumers to be able to use their credentials just about everywhere. And in addition to that, we heard Chris talk about messaging, and we fully believe that messaging is another medium to be used for commerce. So we created a super messenger for our users to have one tap and hands-free messaging as well on their application. And we also are providing tools for businesses to be able to have 3-in-1 interactive commerce messages to be sent across all of their existing channels to their businesses, and then invoke and allow the consumer to be able to get support, ask that question, overcome the objections, and then when they're ready to pay, of course, pay with their regular credentials, but also with their super wallet, with their biometric fingerprints. So it is a connected commerce platform, and we're in the beginning of this journey. We have beta users that are now giving us great feedback. We really appreciate them. And we just got a beta user for the commerce messaging for brands as well. And that's going really well. So Dale, I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the folks' inventions and innovations here as well. Thank you. I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you so much. And, when it comes to in-app messaging, that's an area that David is really shining in. And I'd like to get your perspective, David, on how you're using edge computing and in-app messaging to really enhance delivery. I think that in some ways consumers may be expecting to better, sharper, real-time delivery experience, and I think that's attributable to some of the innovations that you're making. So I'd love to hear more about that and how these capabilities that became lifelines during the pandemic, how in your opinion can we make them more mainstream going forward in the new normal?
Yeah, it's super interesting, Dale. And I think if you start with consumer behavior, and ultimately the mobile phone is the center of so many of these digital transactions, the engagement, and that's only been driven by pandemic and touchless and whatever. But ultimately, almost all of those user interactions happen on the lock screen of your phone, right? So if you get an instant message, if there's something interesting on Twitter, you'll even get a confirmation after payment in store. All of that is actually delivered through the lock screen on your device. And ultimately, that's what we think of as kind of the push notification layer or local notification layer on the device. And so what we at OpenBack have been investing heavily in is to develop a kind of a better underlying infrastructure to be able to deliver not just the kind of mobile experiences of today, but actually to be able to use the device itself more, use more of the power of the device to deliver better experiences. So that can be, much faster notifications, that can be interactive notifications that the users can engage with, maybe approve a transaction, file something, categorize something, but also by operating kind of on device and on the edge, instead of just sending out these messages from the cloud like you might an email, you get to control the experience more. So you get to control the moment of delivery. And it's not just like the stuff of geolocation, which kind of has had some wins, but not that much. And like we see 10-12% user opt-in across different types of mobile app for location, but you're much more using contextual data to deliver the right experiences for consumers. And what we really see, and this sort of theme and trend, and it applies across every business that's lucky enough to have a mobile app on a consumer's device, right, is that the user experiences that you expect to see as a consumer are set by the best-in-class apps on your device. So if Uber is doing something clever, if an Apple, one of their own apps is doing something clever, you start to expect that from all of your, from your wallets, from your airlines, from any of the apps on your phone. And so we see this massive acceleration that COVID-19 has only accelerated further in terms of the need to kind of evolve faster and faster. I think you're muted, Dale. I'm not sure if you want to follow up.
It's amazing, and as I reflect on every one of the innovations that we've highlighted today, it occurred to me that all of them share certain characteristics. None of these are a patch. None of these are a quick fix. None of these are what I would refer to as a bridge technology. Each of these solutions represent something that is deeply embedded in the core technology. So each of you have really taken a deep dive into the technology and to understand it and speak its language. And I think that probably we're getting to part 2 now, where we think about how we can help retailers navigate the new landscape. And as someone pointed out, the retailer who understands the pros and cons of all of the available solutions out there, the driving consumer engagement being a plus, vulnerabilities and security issues being a minus. I'd like to turn it back to Eric and get your thoughts on, with all of these available solutions, how can we help retailers and how can we educate consumers on what to look for in a truly robust and compliant contactless solution?
Thanks, Dale. Yeah, I kind of echo a few things that were said, but I would say, most breaches happen to be consumer inputs. Individual breaches tend to be user-related. Data exposure tends to be kind of a merchant-related breach. I think the key is limiting some of those inputs are really important. However, we all talk and preach frictionless, but there are friendly friction or important friction points in that customer journey. And so for in our experience, and we're processing millions and millions of payment verification transactions and growing about 2x month over month. Especially post-COVID, as you can imagine, more and more demand for touchless and contactless engagements. We really preach in that customer journey how to identify those specific contact points between merchants and consumers, and how to, within that customer journey, insert different points of friction that are authentic. Most consumers do product discovery from their mobile device. Excuse me. The device is personal. So as you're engaged in that with that mobile device, whether it's online or offline, how do you use that to also validate some form of authentication, especially as online and offline worlds start to collide? One of the biggest growth areas have been BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store, where maybe that initial discovery or engagement happens in an online world, and yet you have a physical offline pickup. So what's really critical there is in that customer journey, being able to take advantage and explain to the consumer, validating identity to device, and device, some form of association to the proximity of the merchant in which you're facilitating a transaction. So I think in the end, you need to be clear with the intent. Why is it required for those points of friendly friction? Making sure that that effort is really right sized for the engagement. Entering passwords and passcodes and contorting your phone multiple times to be able to do different forms of validation to pick up 3 items at a grocery store doesn't necessarily sound effective. And the byproduct of that, it creates fatigue, and then shortcomings and or shortcuts is usually the behavior. And when you have that, that's when you have different forms of security breach. So, it's really important that, and something said that, transport is not just transport. I think transport, you have to be able to figure out how can you go deeper into that security level? How do you help identify that consumer, the consumer that owns that device? There are natural services that are implemented in the mobile platform that allows you to achieve that. And then from that device, ensuring that the association with the merchant happens in an authentic way. And great thing is, in most cases, the consumer has that mobile device, that mobile app, that mobile wallet. That's your point of communication. So when they're doing product discovery, when they're in that journey, being able to provide that feedback loop, no pun intended, loop, Will, for the usage of the word loop, but being able to provide that feedback loop along with my product discovery and providing that same interface to merchants, because they're dealing with now that conflict of real-time inventory where you have consumers who are competing online and offline for that items on the shelf. And so helping them kind of process those inputs the same way that the consumers processing those inputs are really important. But there are things that you can do to message what I call entry. You know, the welcome is a form of personalization, but it also is a validation check. I'm walking into this establishment, I get validation and confirmation I'm there. Information being accurate is a first obvious point of gratification. Merchants can then personalize that experience, helping consumers navigate through that process, but also exit. Whether you complete the transaction or decided to leave that establishment, that merchant, that validation of exit. And so there's simple techniques that can be used and applied to make a friendly friction experience that does allow for merchants and consumers to understand what's happened in that journey.
I think that's a great point, Eric. And I think that a lot of us have complicated relationships with our devices. And you know, when it comes to removing friction, I think that's a great place to start. Because anytime that you can help someone feel better about their connected device, I think that's a win. And Chris, I'd like to get your thoughts on what additional and what essential characteristics do you think retailers should look for when they're evaluating different solutions in the contactless and touchless arena? I think you're muted.
I promised myself I wouldn't do it this time, and I did it again. I think there's a host of things that each of these retailers or merchants or whatever you want to call them need to look for as they look for new and innovative solutioning, right? Number one, I think it has to be something that is more of an open network, right? So, you know, one of the things that we pride ourselves on at Althea is we have about 150 payment gateways that we connect to today. 10 of the largest messaging platforms, and that includes everything from WhatsApp to Facebook Messenger to Apple Messenger and everything else that's coming. And then being able to kind of seamlessly through a couple simple API connectivities, be able to disintermediate or actually just kind of figure out what the merchant's trying to do in terms of sending a bill, an invoice, a payment request, whether you're at a pizza shop or a utility company or an auto loan company. Be able to get that message in a succinct factor, simple and secure to the consumer wherever they are, allow them to pay it with a 4-digit PIN, they get a receipt. So it's making that process simple and seamless to all of the partners that we work with, right? And the reality is that these are complex ecosystems. Every one of us is dealing with very complex stuff behind the scenes. And so to go in and try to get something that's going to plug in neatly or seamlessly to what you're working with today. You might have multiple gateways, you might have multiple messaging platforms, you might have multiple software databases that you're running out of, but having partners that have been there, that have done that can integrate seamlessly and easily, get you the reporting back that you need, and at the same time keep all of your security, all your data safe and secure. So it's very complicated, and so I think it's definitely worth the time for these partners to do a deep dive and really understand what they're trying, what the end game is, what they're trying to solve for, and that this is also helping to future-proof things for them as well. So they're thinking about tomorrow versus just trying to check a box today.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. And Will, when it comes to looking ahead to tomorrow and next gen mobile wallets, what do you see the role of the universal wallet in helping to bridge the digital divide that so many consumers and retailers and service providers grapple with? How does that power what you described as super messaging, and how does your super messaging enrich enrich the customer experience in the new normal?
So Dale, I think you asked really two questions there. One is about the wallet, and then the other was about the messaging, and both are actually vitally important. The super wallet itself, really what I call next generation wallet. Some of these already exist in places like China with WeChat Pay, which has happened to be both a super messenger and a super wallet. But they really don't exist here in the United States. And the truth is many of the wallets are either, tied to a device platform, or they're only used for online shopping in certain channels. And none of them are truly self-custody for me to be able to use everywhere. And the reason that we decided to go to self-custody is because we're in the verge of going from what we call an attention economy, where other people are leveraging your data and my data, and be able to monetize that data for their purposes, which ends up selling you more ads and getting you more spam, to where why can't consumers and us have a secure but private place to store our data and our content, and then let us monetize it in that we can build our behavior data, our credit scores to get better financing, our driving scores to get better insurance from companies to serve us, and our ability to get products and services based on the data of who we are. And that is the mission that OV Loop is on right now, is to take us from an attention economy to really a relationship economy, where the center of who I am, my privacy, my security, and my convenience are all tied in. So to do that is not easy, but we've been working on it for several years now to create a device agnostic, channel agnostic, tender agnostic super wallet that makes it easier, more secure and private for us. Now, so that's the wallet question. Now, you also asked, what about the super messaging? And as earlier discussed, super messaging is absolutely an essential next channel. And it happens to be a channel that should be agnostic of the current ways that businesses and brands are interacting with their own customer base. So whether it's through email, which is the most prevalent messaging format out there, everybody sends us email, or text message, or it could be an IVR to redirect me to pay my bill, or an agent trying to help me solve my problem. But instead of having that agent take my PCI data while they're sitting, they could be sitting in their 1 or 2 bedroom apartment.
Yeah, right.
Most people are working from home. They're not even going back, right, to the call centers. Why can't they just send me a message, allow me to pay within that message, see the content, but pay it in a secure, authenticated way with my biometrics, and use that super wallet for its benefits across these different channels? So that's where we see super messaging is going from self-service or customer service to create a hybrid of what we call assisted service across these different channels. So imagine getting a link in your email and being able to click on that link, or it could be from your text message, or redirect it from a barcode, from your app, from somebody's website. No matter how you get it, when you see your invoice, your bill, your offer, if you have questions, click on a live chat. Get that question answered, resolved. It could be, hey, I don't recognize that charge. Why do I have a late fee? Does this product have this feature? Address it. So that's what the assisted service right inside of the messaging allows you to do. And then when it hits pay, ready to pay, you hit the pay now button. You can pay with your credit card, your debit card, your bank account, whether it's ACH, and we're going to be looking at enabling RTP as well. And if you're in Canada, Interact, Australia, FPOS, those are the systems that we'll be adding on, but all tied to your authenticated credentials. So that's where super messaging can now bring in super wallet at the same time to create that next generation of connected commerce experience.
That's Will, that's some great stuff. I mean, ironically, we do the exact same things. You just have some better terminology with your super messaging. I like that. But yeah, I think it's where the market's going in general, right? Everybody's looking to kind of build these super wallets and super messaging platforms that enable these kind of instant communications, these instant rewards, instant transactions, instant conversations. It's all moving to a much faster economy where consumers expect to be met on their terms and be met where they are. So I think that was excellent.
Precisely. And that's why, great minds think alike, and there is a market, and a huge market,
Yes.
that have super messaging and super wallets combined.
I think as a journalist, I also see a maturing consumer in the near future. Someone who has maybe had some practice with some of our connected technologies, who can then take another leap forward to totally control their experience and have more of a say about where their data goes, and to have more control over that data. I really think that speaks volumes to next generation commerce. And I'd like to get David's thoughts about that. And as we collectively write the playbook, what are some of the guidelines that you would recommend that technology providers and service providers offer in the new normal?
It's super interesting, and just listening to Will and Christopher's exchange there around super message, super wallet, and I think something that we're super focused on because of our kind of on-device capability infrastructure for other apps and wallets to use. But one of the kind of outside of payments, one of the use cases and categories of customers we have is all around data privacy. And so our edge technology allows business rules, logic, and content to go out to the consumer's device, but their data never needs to leave their device. So we've already got a whole bunch of kids apps that use our technology. So that DreamWorks movie, How to Train Your Dragon, they have a real popular kids app that use us. And it's outside the payment space, but it's that same theme of, if you can keep the consumer's data on device only, it's encrypted if it's backed up to the cloud. And we see that as just a huge thematic trend that continues to accelerate and accelerate. Even in the last couple of days, some of the stuff that Facebook has announced, YouTube is behind the dial a little bit on what they're up to and need to catch up. All of these services, but ultimately the theme that unites them all is, from a data privacy perspective, is protecting that consumer's data. And our view and our kind of bet in the technology we've built is that actually that data all needs to get processed on the device, and only what really, really needs to be collected in order to actually deliver that service. So that might be the chat connection to the support person that Will was mentioning in the super messaging case. But ultimately, that's a huge thematic trend. Apple have been banging on this drum themselves from a kind of device and mobile OS level of the kind of mobile stack, and it's become a huge sort of marketing slogan, even if the CSAM stuff hasn't gone so well for the last week or two. But ultimately, we think that's ultimately got to be a large part of kind of future guidelines, is the idea of protecting the consumer's data, only collecting off their device what needs to be collected in order to deliver the service they expect. And we, ultimately, I think we're seeing that happen anyway, and it's being driven, and we're seeing kind of that happening first, as I mentioned, kind of with the FTC COPPA with children's online privacy. We're also seeing it with some customers in the healthcare space, given healthcare patient data portability not leaving the device. But we expect that to snowball, through other industries, through other regulators, through other industry bodies, because it just makes sense, right? If you don't collect the data that you don't need, you're not exposed should something go wrong, or should some law change or something nefarious happen.
I agree. And I think, to Chris's earlier point, it's incredibly complicated to make things simple and seamless. And to try to allocate that control in a way that is not only compliant, but also enjoyable for the consumer.
Yeah, and they do say, right, there was a great article not so long ago where it's, the younger generation who don't look at email at all, but they still expect these great interactive services on Instagram or Discord or wherever they're hanging out. And they do implicitly understand there is some trade-off, right? You're getting that great service, maybe it's a free service, but you're giving up some privacy, some ability to be targeted for ads. But they're conscious of that trade-off, and these are people who've kind of grown up with these technologies, and so their understanding of that trade-off they're making by sharing their data is only going to increase. And so therefore the brands delivering them services are going to have to up their game and provide that level of transparency and that confidence to those consumers as they grow older and the next generation comes along again as well.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Has anyone seen any come through? If not, I'm going to be a journalist and just throw one out to everyone. I'd like to know, in addition to the OV Valet, which is currently in beta, what near-term solutions are on your product roadmaps? I'd be very interested.
Yeah, so on the beta right now, we are currently having our own tokens that you're able to use as a proxy card to be able to tap and pay just about everywhere at 94% of existing point of sale. And we're allowing you to take your debit card and load it with it so you don't have to give your real debit card, whether it's physically or whether it's online. Minimize some of that hacking that's been happening quite a bit with data breaches. So this proxy card is part of the solution on this generation, but the roadmap that we have is a better version of that card that's coming up. We're going to call it the Love Card, the OV Love Card, and it's going to have even more capabilities to tie into giving people the ability to have subscription management, peer-to-peer capabilities. But also we're excited about getting Visa banks on board to have Visa tokens that can be used in your bank's own credit cards and debit cards. And then we're going to be working with MasterCard after that to get MDES certified. All of these are on our roadmap, and it's going to take some time before we bring all of these to bear. But we have a long roadmap ahead of us on the Super Wallet and the Valet, and even Valet 2.0 that's coming next year. But the whole idea is to empower the consumers with not only phone and ability to use the phone as a mechanism and to tap and pay with the phone, but also with accessories that are optional. And I handed my Valet this weekend to a waiter, and every time I do that, people are blown away at how cool this is and the new technology and how secure it is. So we're excited about the roadmap that we're putting forth on the consumer side to empower individuals. Next year, we're even going to have, believe it or not, we're going to have a My Driving section to let you know your own driving score and let you share those driving scores to reduce the cost of the insurance. And then we're teaming up with some different folks to look at even offering lower cost mobility as a service by either the end of next year or the beginning of the year after. So there's a lot that we're doing on our roadmap. And then certainly on the super messaging side, we're working with large banks as well as brands that are looking at this as a mechanism for them to do bill payment as well as interactive offers and deals. So lots of things that are coming up for late 2021 and early 2022. So we're excited, Dale.
Thank you, Will. And I do have a question that came in for Eric. How can we balance proximity verification with consumer privacy?
Great question. question that comes up all the time. So someone mentioned earlier, making sure that you're right sizing the data that is exposed throughout that journey. And so we work within the confines of the rules and regulations with respect to PII, ensuring that that for the most part, whatever the appropriate data that needs to be shared during that proximity validation is the appropriate information. In many cases, what we're doing, and kind of touch upon roadmap, we're actually launching very shortly a proximity token that's integrated with network tokens that effectively rides on top of the existing ecosystem in Rails that allows us to then marry essentially the proximity information along with the network tokens to help further facilitate those transactions. As you can imagine today, many of these transactions are classified as e-commerce transactions, but in some cases, you have consumer and merchant or service provider present at the time of association. They're just not physically pulling out plastic and inserting person present in some capacity where you have person validating with service. Uber's a great example of that. Gig economy, where the initiation of services, both parties are present. Delivery platforms, the extension of sometimes the restaurant is those delivery platforms and they're present at the time of fulfillment. So enabling kind of the combination of proximity tokens and network tokens to do the association of person, possibly card provisioned on device associated with the actual transaction, and doing that in again, quote, quote, frictionless way is really what we're achieving. And then doing that, adhering to all of the PII related issues and making sure we're part of the regulatory kind of process. And just to build on something that Will was saying as well, I mean, I completely agree wholeheartedly as far as these Uber super apps. Probably our biggest growth is generated by the fact that several of the large super apps actually use Listener as a way to authenticate and transmit a lot of that payment verification information, especially when and if NFC and or in some cases even QR code or image-based cameras aren't present. These are mobile devices. A microphone and speaker is always present. And so our ability to offer that flexibility to deliver the appropriate verification on top of the payment tokens or the payment services itself is what's been a driving force for us.
Thank you. Well, I think we're out of time, but I want to thank everyone for your insights and commentary today in what I'm sure will be a continuing evolution and discussion. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.